You are here because something within you already knows the truth, that you are the operant power. In this lecture, we will not chase riches. We will become the consciousness of wealth itself. Assume the feeling of being wealthy. Now, do not wait for the money to come. Live in the end. Wealth is a state of consciousness. Enter it, embody it, and the world will rearrange itself to reflect your assumption. The world you perceive is not the world that is. It is merely the world you have assumed into being. You walk daily through the halls of your own mental architecture, believing them to be external structures, when in truth they are projections from within. The solid objects you touch, the circumstances you encounter, the very fabric of what you call reality, all of it emanates from the invisible realm of your consciousness. You are already creating your reality. You are already living from imagination. You simply haven't recognized your power. Most people live their entire lives searching externally for what can only be found in the depths of their own consciousness. They seek and strive and struggle against circumstances, unaware that those very circumstances are nothing more than shadows cast by their own assumptions. They pray to powers they believe are separate from themselves, never realizing that the power they seek resides within their own imagination. What if I told you that the solid world around you, the seemingly fixed reality that appears so stubborn and unyielding, is actually fluid, responsive, and waiting for your directive? The great secret, known throughout the ages by the illumined minds of history, is that consciousness is the only reality, and what you assume you become. This truth has been veiled in mystical language, hidden in esoteric teachings, and obscured by those who would keep humanity bound to limiting beliefs. But today, here and now, this knowledge is being revealed to you in its pure practical form. Pause and truly hear these words. Your imagination is not a fantasy factory producing idle daydreams. It is the very substance of creation itself. When you assume a state, you are not pretending. You are engaging the most fundamental law of existence. For imagination creates reality. In the beginning was not the material world, but consciousness itself. All that exists first took form in the imagination of the Creator, and you, being made in that same image, possess the identical creative faculty. This is not metaphor or allegory. It is literal truth that has been demonstrated countless times by those who have discovered how to harness the transformative power of assumption. Consider for a moment how you have created your current life. Every aspect of your present experience began as an assumption in consciousness. The career you now have, the relationships you're engaged in, the very self-image you maintain, all were first states of consciousness that you assumed to be true until they externalized as your reality. This process was not optional or occasional. It is the fundamental mechanism by which all experience comes into being. The Bible tells us, "As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he." But this is more than ancient wisdom. It is a practical description of the law that governs human experience. Your thoughts, charged with the conviction of feeling, become the patterns that reality must follow. This is not positive thinking or mere motivation. It is the physics of consciousness operating with the same precision as gravity or electricity. The difference between those who seem blessed by fortune and those who struggle against constant limitation is not external circumstance or privilege, but their assumptions about themselves and the world. One assumes abundance and opportunity to be their natural state, while the other assumes lack and restriction. And both experience the perfect manifestation of their assumption. You may object, saying, "But I've had thoughts of wealth and health that never materialized." And you would be right. Thoughts alone are not enough. It is your assumptions, those deep convictions that you accept as truth, that shape your world. A fleeting thought of wealth, while maintaining an assumption of lack, cannot override the creative power of your fundamental beliefs. It is what you accept as real in the depths of your being that manifests as your experience. This is why many spiritual teachings emphasize faith. Not faith in external powers or distant deities, but faith in the reality of what is not yet visible to the senses. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Your faith, your absolute conviction in the reality of your assumption, is the substance that forms your experience. If you truly understood the creative power you wield through your assumptions, you would never again waste a moment in doubt or fear. You would guard your assumptions as the precious creative instruments they are, carefully choosing which states of consciousness to occupy, knowing that these states will inevitably project themselves into your physical experience. The great awakening that humanity now approaches is not a political or technological revolution. It is the recognition of this fundamental truth. You are the operant power in your world, and your assumption is the instrument of your creative authority. All things are possible to those who believe, not because some external force grants wishes, but because belief itself, assumption fully embodied, is the very substance of creation. The universe is not a vast machine operating independently of your consciousness. It is, in truth, an infinite sea of possibility, taking form according to the patterns you establish through your assumptions. It responds not to your desires or your demands, but to your state of being, to what you have assumed is true. Many spiritual teachers have proclaimed that you are one with God, but few have explained the practical mechanism of this unity. It is through your imagination, your ability to form and occupy states of consciousness, that you participate in the divine creative process. When you say I am, you invoke the name of God, the pure existence from which all things emerge, and whatever you attach to that declaration becomes your covenant with creation itself. As you listen to these words, something within you is stirring in recognition. A part of you has always known this truth, has sensed that reality is more malleable, more responsive to your inner state than you've been led to believe. That recognition is not coincidence. It is your deeper self acknowledging what it has always known, but had temporarily forgotten. You are the author of your experience, and assumption is your pen. Consider a seed planted in fertile soil. To the physical eye, nothing has changed. The ground appears undisturbed, barren. Yet, beneath the surface, an unstoppable transformation has begun. The seed doesn't question its ability to become a mighty oak. It simply proceeds from its inherent nature. Your assumption works in precisely the same manner, invisible to physical senses, but operating with absolute precision, according to natural law. It germinates in the darkness of consciousness before breaking through into visible manifestation. Most seekers fail because they stand at the threshold of imagination with one foot still planted in their current reality. They mentally rehearse a new state while simultaneously measuring its absence in their physical experience. Like trying to drive a vehicle with one foot on the accelerator and one on the brake, they remain stuck despite their apparent effort. They affirm abundance while counting their limited funds. They declare health while monitoring their symptoms. They profess confidence while nurturing their insecurities. This divided mind, this attempt to serve two masters, renders their creative power ineffective. The critical difference between surface understanding and true mastery lies in your ability to occupy a state so completely that it feels more real than the evidence of your senses. When you can close your eyes and feel the texture, weight, and emotional substance of your desire as an accomplished fact, reality has no choice but to reconfigure itself accordingly. The outer world will always reflect your inner assumptions. This is cosmic law. The universe cannot do otherwise, for it is not separate from your consciousness, but an extension of it, responding with perfect fidelity to the patterns you establish through assumption. The natural mind recoils at this truth, arguing for its limitations and presenting evidence of reality as though such evidence weren't itself the product of past assumptions. But you are not bound by natural thinking. You can adopt supernatural consciousness by recognizing that all causation is mental. Nothing happens to you. Everything happens from you. Every encounter, every circumstance, every apparent obstacle, all are reflections of states you have occupied in consciousness. Once you truly grasp this principle, you can never again play the role of victim, for you understand that you are the author of your experience. You have been taught to live from the outside in, believing what your senses report and forming your self-concept accordingly. This is the old, ineffective approach that keeps humanity bound to repetitive patterns. The new, empowering perspective requires living from the inside out, forming your assumptions first and allowing reality to conform to them. When you make this fundamental shift, What seemed miraculous becomes perfectly natural. The synchronicities that appear, the doors that suddenly open, the inspired ideas that arise, all become the logical consequences of your assumption, rather than unexpected gifts from capricious fortune. Your current circumstances are nothing more than your past assumptions, solidified. They hold no power over your future except the power you grant by continuing to assume they are fixed realities rather than passing shadows. The person you believe yourself to be, with all its limitations and capabilities, is nothing more than an assumption so habitually worn that you've forgotten it is simply a garment of thought that can be exchanged for another. You are not defined by your history, your genetics, your environment, or your past failures and successes. You are defined in each moment by the assumptions you choose to embody. When you truly grasp that your sense of self is just as malleable as any other assumption, you realize there is nothing to change but your conception of self. Change that, and you change everything. This is why all significant transformation begins with a shift in identity, with a new answer to the question, who am I? The moment you assume a new self-concept, the entire universe begins to rearrange itself to accommodate this new definition. People respond differently to you. Opportunities aligned with your new self-concept appear, and circumstances that once seemed fixed begin to dissolve and reform according to the pattern of your assumption. The masters of manifestation throughout history have understood that assumption is not merely a mental technique, but a total psycho-spiritual posture. It involves your entire being, thought, feeling, perception, and the very sense of existence itself. When Neville spoke of feeling it real, he was pointing to this holistic embodiment of your desired state. It is not enough to think about what you want or to visualize it occasionally. You must assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled until that feeling displaces all contrary evidence and becomes your predominant state. This requires a radical trust in the invisible, a willingness to live from what is not yet apparent to the senses. The Bible calls this walking by faith, not by sight. It is the courage to reject the testimony of the senses when they contradict your assumption, not because you are delusional, but because you understand that sensory evidence is the effect of past assumptions, not the cause of future experience. The truly awakened individual gives more credence to their chosen assumption than to temporary appearances, knowing that what is assumed with conviction must inevitably externalize. Many spiritual teachings speak of surrender, but few explain what this truly means. Surrender is not resignation to circumstances or passive acceptance of what is. True surrender is releasing your attachment to how things appear to be and fully embracing how you have assumed them to be. It is letting go of the need for physical evidence before you will believe, and instead believing so completely that physical evidence has no choice but to conform to your assumption. The law of assumption transcends all other so-called laws. Physics tells us that energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed. Yet consciousness, through the power of assumption, transforms energy into specific forms and experiences. Biology speaks of genetic predisposition, yet assumption has been shown to influence gene expression through the emerging science of epigenetics. Economics discusses scarcity of resources, yet assumption creates avenues of abundance that defy conventional limitations. There is no law in any realm that is not subordinate to the foundational law of consciousness expressing through assumption. This principle explains why identical circumstances produce different results for different people. Two individuals facing the same challenge will experience entirely different outcomes based on their assumptions about the situation, about themselves, and about what is possible. One assumes the challenge is an opportunity for growth and approaches it with confidence and creativity. The other assumes it is an unfair burden and approaches it with resentment and limitation. The external circumstances may be identical, but the experiences that unfold will bear no resemblance to each other, for each person navigates reality through the filter of their assumptions. Consider how this principle operates in relationships. The person you believe another to be is the person they will invariably appear to be in your experience. This is not because your assumption controls them, but because your assumption determines which aspects of their complex nature become visible and significant to you. When you change your assumption about someone, You literally begin to encounter a different version of them, not because they have changed, but because your assumption has altered what you perceive and how you interpret their behavior. This same principle applies to your relationship with the entirety of existence. If you assume the universe is hostile or indifferent to your desires, you will experience constant struggle and disappointment. If you assume it is a loving, responsive field intelligence that supports your highest good, you will encounter evidence of this support in countless ways. The universe you experience is inseparable from your assumptions about it. The transformative power of assumption is not a theory to be debated, but a principle to be applied. Its validity is not established through argument, but through consistent results. Those who test this principle with sincere commitment invariably discover its remarkable effectiveness. Those who dismiss it without investigation remain bound by the very limitations they assume to be inescapable reality. Everything you've been seeking, the confidence, the abundance, the love, the freedom isn't waiting for you in some distant future. It exists now as a state of consciousness available for your immediate occupation. You need not earn it, deserve it, or struggle for it. You need only assume it. This is the liberating truth that transforms your relationship with yourself and with the entire universe. The assumption of freedom is freedom itself. The assumption of worthiness is immediate worthiness. The assumption of abundance generates the conditions of abundance through an unfailing law. The revelation that transforms dreamers into creators is this assumption. Hardens into fact. Your consciousness is the true substance. Physical reality is merely shadow. What you feel as real becomes real. In this very moment, you stand at the threshold of infinite possibility. The distance between where you are and where you desire to be is not measured in time or space, but in assumption. Assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled. Now, feel the relief, the joy, the satisfaction of your desire accomplished. Feel it with the same certainty with which you know your own name. Let this feeling saturate your consciousness until it displaces all doubt and becomes your dominant emotional tone. Don't wait for permission. Don't prepare for change. Don't set conditions. Simply step mentally into the state of having what you desire and bring to that state the full force of your feeling attention. The universe doesn't respond to what you want or need or deserve. It responds to what you assume as true with conviction. It mirrors back to you the states you occupy in consciousness, manifesting your assumptions with perfect precision, regardless of whether those assumptions serve your highest good or limit your expression. There are depths to this practice that we've only begun to explore. Realms of consciousness where even greater wonders await those who dare to venture beyond conventional limitations of thought. For the imagination is not merely creative, it is creation itself. It is not simply a function of consciousness, it is the very substance of God operating within you. When you imagine, you are engaging the same power that brings worlds into being, that sustains galaxies, that animates all of life. You are participating in the fundamental creative process of existence itself. You have always been the author of your experience, unconsciously scripting circumstances through your habitual assumptions. Now you are invited to write consciously, deliberately, with the full knowledge that what you assume with feeling becomes your reality. This is not merely a responsibility. It is the greatest freedom imaginable. For in recognizing your role as creator rather than creature, you liberate yourself from dependence on external conditions for your fulfillment. Your joy, your peace, your sense of purpose and possibility all emerge from within as natural expressions of the states you choose to occupy. The practice of assumption is deceptively simple, yet it holds the power to transform every aspect of your experience. Begin with something small. If your natural mind resists the greater implications of this principle, assume a specific pleasant encounter, a small unexpected gift, a minor but welcome surprise. As you prove the law in these modest applications, your confidence will grow, enabling you to apply the same principle to greater desires with equal conviction. The key to effective assumption lies in your ability to generate and sustain feeling. Mere intellectual acceptance of a state is not enough. You must feel its reality, sense its presence, inhabit it emotionally. This is why the great teachers of manifestation have emphasized the role of feeling in creating experience. Whatsoever things you desire when you pray, believe that you receive them, and ye shall have them. The belief referenced here is not intellectual assent, but emotional acceptance, the feeling of having already received. As you cultivate the art of assumption, you may encounter resistance from those around you who remain committed to conventional views of reality and causation. They may question your apparent detachment from realistic concerns or challenge your conviction in what is not yet visible. Remember that their perspective reflects their assumptions, not universal truth. Your relationship with reality is uniquely your own, governed by your assumptions, not theirs. Hold fast to your vision, maintaining your assumption despite contrary appearances or opinions, and watch as reality reconfigures itself to match the pattern you've established in consciousness. The practice of assumption often requires a period of gestation before physical manifestation becomes apparent. Just as a seed requires time beneath the soil before breaking through to visibility, your assumptions may work invisibly for a time before emerging as tangible reality. During this interval, your task is to maintain your assumption, to nurture it with continued attention and emotional conviction, protecting it from the weeds of doubt and contradictory thought. Those who abandon their assumption prematurely, concluding that it isn't working, fail to understand the natural process by which invisible causes produce visible effect. Remember this truth that has always lived within you. The world is yourself pushed out. There is no separation between your consciousness and its manifestation. They are one and the same process viewed from different dimensions of awareness. What you seek is seeking you. What you desire desires you. For you and your fulfilled desire are one, connected eternally in the depths of your own miraculous imagination. This is not mystical poetry, but the precise articulation of how reality functions. When you assume a state, you are not reaching out to connect with something separate from yourself. You are recognizing what is already yours in consciousness, claiming it as your present reality despite temporary appearances to the contrary. You do not need to make your good happen or force your desires into being. You need only assume the state of having already received, and then live from that assumption with unwavering fidelity to its reality. The outer world may temporarily present facts that contradict your assumption. Physical circumstances, other people's behaviors, apparent obstacles, all may suggest that your assumption is merely wishful thinking, disconnected from reality. In these moments, remember that what you observe is not current creation, but the manifestation of past assumptions. Hold steady in your new assumption, giving it the same credence you would give to your physical senses, and watch as the outer world gradually realigns to reflect your inner conviction. We have been taught to believe that seeing is believing, but the truth is that believing is seeing. What you deeply believe, what you assume to be true, determines what you are capable of perceiving. Two people can witness the same event and extract entirely different meanings and implications from it, based on their underlying assumptions. Reality does not impose itself upon a passive consciousness. Consciousness actively shapes and interprets reality according to its assumptions. Change your assumptions, and you literally begin to inhabit a different world. The ultimate freedom comes when you realize that even your concept of self is an assumption that can be consciously chosen rather than passively accepted. You are not bound by your history, your circumstances, your apparent limitations, or the roles you have played until now. At any moment, you can assume a new concept of self, step into a different identity, and begin to experience life from that assumption. This is the essence of transformation. Not gradually improving an existing identity, but assuming an entirely new state of being from which different possibilities naturally emerge. Assume your wish fulfilled, and that assumption will transform your world from within. For what you assume, you become, and what you become shapes all that you experience. This is a simple, profound truth that has always been available to those with eyes to see and ears to hear. Now it is yours to apply, to test, to live from, and to share with a world that desperately needs to remember its own creative power. The kingdom is within you. The power to shape reality through the magical faculty of assumption that you have possessed from the beginning, but are only now learning to use with conscious intention. Your life is your own magnificent creation. Assume wisely, assume lovingly, assume powerfully, and watch as the universe conspires to make your assumption your living reality.